Welcome to Presidential Fight Club, the show that answers the question, if all 44 presidents fought each other one-on-one, who would win? Hosted by two history professors who have too much time on their hands, Scott Rank and James Early. Hey everyone, welcome to Presidential Fight Club. We're in the second round. We're looking at the fight between Franklin Pierce and Millard Fillmore. James, tell us all about Franklin Pierce. What does he bring to the fight, and what makes him a contender?
Franklin Pierce, well, let's see. Let me give you the basic stats. He was about 5'10". He was of average build, not real skinny, not particularly overweight either. Pierce has an interesting story. He didn't really have much of a background in terms of athletic kind of activities. He wasn't a boxer or a wrestler or anything like that. He wasn't famous for doing farm work. Famous, like you get famous by doing farm work. But you know what I mean? He wasn't known for having grown up doing a lot of manual labor like a Fillmore or Abraham Lincoln or somebody like that. But he was very brave. Very, very brave. And I'll tell you a story I read about him. When the Mexican War broke out, he volunteered to serve, and he had no military experience prior to that whatsoever. And he ends up as a Brigadier General in the United States Army, and he's going down he's under Winfield Scott, and they're marching toward Mexico City. And Pierce's horse steps in a crevice or something. I don't know exactly. The horse stumbles. He might have stepped over a rock or he stepped into a crevice. But anyway, and Pierce was thrown forward into the pommel of his saddle. Basically, not to be too graphic, but his groin hit very, very hard the horn of the saddle. And every guy out there knows that that's extremely painful. And so he had to deal with that. And then the horse fell over, and the horse landed on him, almost crushing his knee, and he was pinned down to the ground for the longest time. But in spite of that, he managed to recover from these, and he got back into the fight later, and then his horse stumbled again and also crushed his knee in the same place. So his knee was injured twice in the exact same spot. I guess, do you have more than one spot on a knee? I don't know. But anyway, so Pierce had these horrible injuries, and yet he kept on doing his best to stay in the fight. And at one point, General Scott said, "You need to go to the rear and take it easy. You know, you've been injured." And he says, "No, General, I must lead my troops." And the General Scott said, "Okay, that's fine." And so Pierce didn't let a little pain stop him from fighting. He definitely had a fighting spirit, and he can't really say he had a distinguished career as a general, but he did the best he could, and he certainly wasn't a coward. He didn't make any mistakes that we know of. He served as competently as he was able to, given his injuries. But yeah, Pierce is tough, and he's a fighter.
Well, Pierce is going up against Millard Fillmore. We saw him in the fight with Martin Van Buren that he disposed of. Fillmore is one of the worst and definitely most forgettable presidents. He was number 13, which is getting us off to a bad start. One of the attributes we agreed on why he beat Van Buren was the tough upbringing that he had. He was born in a log cabin. He was largely self-educated. He probably had to experience a lot of corporal punishment when he was growing up. And like we said earlier, he's not a big guy. He's 5'9", don't know his weight, but probably fairly thin like most people at that time. So Fillmore grows up in New York, in the western part of the state, at the time when it's still considered frontier, and his family suffers poverty when he's growing up. So those are some of the factors. He doesn't have the military experience of Franklin Pierce, but if we're going on tenacity, based on his background, he might be able to bring some things into the fight that Pierce doesn't necessarily have. So that's my argument for what he brings to the battle. James, who is the victor?
Well, once again, according to the voters and American history fanatics, and they are very fanatical and they're very knowledgeable about their presidents, maybe presidents too, but presidents. Franklin Pierce is the winner. Pierce probably got about 2/3 of the vote. So if that were simulating a real fight, you could say that he took a few lumps, but he gave as good as he got and eventually overcame in the end.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, his valiance in the Mexican War speaks a lot for him. Also, he was a very heavy drinker. He was constantly drunk, especially as president. I don't know if that helps in a battle. I guess his inhibitions aren't there. He won't
That's
feel
a good
punch.
point. Yeah, he was one of our biggest drinkers of all the presidents. People, Grant has a reputation for being a drunkard, which is totally false. He was not, but Pierce actually was.
Right. His opponents would say that he was the victor of many a hard-fought battle. And he even died of cirrhosis of the liver in case that you need an autopsy to prove it. So definitely a hard drinker.
Definitely.
All right. Well, that is our fight. Well, we say goodbye to Millard Fillmore here. The next fight that we have in this round is JFK, John F. Kennedy versus Chester A. Arthur. So maybe we'll bring in our Kennedy impressions for the next fight, and we'll see you there. Thanks for listening to Presidential Fight Club. If you'd like to download your own printable bracket sheets for each regional tournament so you can guess how the tournament will go, check out presidentialfightclub.com. We'd appreciate it if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts as well. Thanks for listening, and may you fight with the stamina of Teddy Roosevelt, the courage of George Washington, and the reach of Abraham Lincoln.